listener production.
A warning. This episode contains references to sexual assault. Please listen with care.
Around 30% of Australians have a tattoo. That number is growing.
Tattoos can form a circumstantial data for an identification.
Even when removed or burned, forensic experts can use tattoos to identify offenders and victims of crimes.
This particular person was in an advanced mummified state. Mummified meaning that their skin was quite leathery and dark brown, so visual identification was not possible. All the other means of identification were not coming up with any leads.
This is one of many techniques forensic photographers like Karen Byrne use to document everything from crime scenes to autopsies.
It's a modified camera, specialist camera that we use, and infrared radiation will penetrate deeper into the skin and we can record the tattoo very clearly. In fact, it's incredible the way it comes up, as clear as the day it was done.
In this rewind episode of Crime Insiders Forensics, former host Kathryn Fox talks to Karen about the surprising ways evidence can be captured, the emotional weight of the job, and how forensic photography plays a crucial role in securing justice.
So I did nursing. While I was training, I was very interested in photography. I did that at night school. And once I finished nursing, I travelled for a while and I felt like I wanted to study again. And I actually decided, I don't remember at what point, that forensic work would be good. And I went to the open day at RMIT and said, I'm interested in forensic photography. And they sort of said, well, there's no jobs. So, see what you can do. You can join the police force and work as a photographer for the police force. But as a civilian, there aren't not a lot of job opportunities. But after the course, I did some work experience at the Institute and ended up with basically the only job in Victoria, which is civilian forensic photographer.
When you first got into it, did you actually really understand what it involved?
Because we studied it during my course, I did have a bit of an understanding. I remember it's a very strange feeling going in on the first day. With a background of nursing, I had seen someone deceased before, but I remember walking into the mortuary and really having a look around and just thinking these people really don't look well. I just don't think they look well at all.
The staff or the people
that they're not well. Well, both. No, really not the staff. No, but the people. And it was in funny sort of thought, but that's what I thought. And it's so interesting though, the work, that you sort of quickly adjust to it. Although, having said that, I do remember all my first cases. I think before you get your psychological toolkit into shape, the first cases, I just remember every detail.
What was your first case?
Some are just so sad that I wouldn't say it, but one, interestingly, was during the Frankston murders, the serial murders in Frankston at that time. And, of course, you're watching the news and I'm seeing the front page of the newspaper and seeing a face on the front page of the newspaper. And then, although I wasn't photographing this particular homicide, I had to go into the homicide room for something. And to see that person there was absolutely chilling. I was actually scared, It was night time and I had to walk to the train and I was really scared afterwards. Yeah, so I guess it was quite an induction to come in at a time like that. With that person was still obviously not yet, they didn't know who was doing all these homicides. So that was quite scary.
Obviously, one of the things you must do as part of your job is seeing victim survivors, particularly sexual assaults, domestic violence. What is your process before you go? What do you take with you when you have to go to an examination like that?
So we have a kit. It has a SLR camera, a external flash. It has a ring flash in case we need it, some scales, And that's basically it. And we would meet, usually the victim survivor would have their examination first and have any specimens taken, etc., with the doctor, and then they'll be called in to the studio, and then the doctor or nurse and myself and the victim survivor would be there, and I would explain the process. This is how it's going to work. We're going to start with, some general photos, and then we'll move in closer to some of the injuries and just explain that at any time we can slow down, we can stop. It's up to you. It's good to get these photos done, but, we'll see how you're comfortable and things like that with them. And the doctors have talked them through already, getting consent and explaining the process. And then it's a matter of sort of like a mapping out, just doing like perhaps there are 7 injuries to the back. We'll do an overall of the back, and then we'll close-ups of the injuries one by one with scale. And sometimes a lack of injury on a certain part of the body is also important, and that will also be documented.
So you actually document absence of injuries as well?
Yeah, it's just making a complete picture that everything matches when all the different pieces of the puzzle come together, that there's no question, well, what about the left side of the neck? Well, okay, that's been documented in their notes, in the physician's notes, that there wasn't anything on the left side, and they've also got a photograph showing that.
When you've been photographing something, is there anything that you've seen that makes you highly suspicious that this person was involved in a violent episode?
Sometimes it's often little injuries to the hands that might make you think there are perhaps fending or, bruises to the knuckles and some sort of knife wounds sometimes to the hands, things like that. But yes, that's possible.
In terms of a homicide victim or an assumed homicide victim, what is your process for photographing?
So it is very thorough. So in the mortuary, we actually have ladders, so we can climb up the ladder and get above view of the body on the trolley. So we would take above overall views of the body and from every side and back, and then all the injuries one by one, along with the pathologist letting us know exactly what they want photographed. And we'd be, depending on the circumstances and concentrating on different areas, perhaps the neck or the eyes or whatever it is that it was determined to require in the circumstances. And then basically every step is photographed during the autopsy.
How long would that take you, roughly?
For a full homicide can take hours, can take anywhere from 2 hours to 6 hours. So what happens, interestingly, with the work that I do is that while the police photograph homicides, my colleague and I photograph every other case, which is a sudden unexpected death or without a medical certificate within a certain amount of time. So it's drownings, suicides, fire death, motor vehicle accidents, workplace accidents. And any one of those cases, although it may start out as just documenting, it can always turn into a suspicious case as you're progressing through it. So we sometimes get involved in stepping up the documentation as we go through. If you get halfway through and you find some bruising in the neck that has got no explanation, then that is something that the pathologist might be worried about and may escalate. Was there something in the scene that would explain that there's bruising on the neck or the position the deceased was found? They'd be looking for more information, and if there's no explanation, then that's a concern.
Then how does that escalate? What actually happens?
Yeah, a few things can happen. It's usually it'd be something along the lines of, we better photograph this right now, and then the pathologist might stop what they're doing and call the police informant for some more information and see if that resolves the situation. If there's still some question mark, it's possible that they will then escalate and then call the homicide squad and then take it from there. So that happens occasionally, not that often, but it does. That's really the process of the autopsy. It's really a very methodical look to make sure everything is looked at in detail, and that's what, you want to make sure that someone, I guess, hasn't been killed, and now you want to make sure that that detail's documented and looked at.
Another part of your role is to photograph identifying bodily features on unidentified deceased. What are you looking for when you're trying to help with identification?
So I think a good way to explain that is to go through a case that I had. So an unidentified and decomposed person, male, was found in unusual circumstances. Actually, the circumstances were weird enough for the homicide squad to get involved, having not known who this person is and where they were found. So homicide squad took carriage of this case. And one of the first things people are trying to do, our team, is also, while the autopsy is getting organised, is also organise identification. Very important. So they're looking at dental, they're looking at visual identification, they're looking at DNA samples and any family members of reported missing persons. So all this information's taken into account. This particular person was in an advanced mummified state, and actually mummified meaning that their skin was quite leathery and dark brown. So visual identification was not possible, and all the other means of identification were not coming up with any leads. So I think I was called in on the next morning to photograph some personal items that the deceased had with him, and with a view to sending that out to the public to say, can anyone identify these items? The other thing we chose to do was to do an infrared scan of the body, a photographic scan, to look for tattoos, because tattoos can form a circumstantial data for an identification. So I've been doing this job for a long time, and usually with tattoos, you can usually see partial tattoo or some evidence of it, or a family member has said there's a tattoo on the right side of the arm. So, all right, we can look there. So the beauty of infrared, it's a modified camera, specialist camera that we use, and infrared radiation will penetrate deeper into the skin, and we can record the tattoo very clearly. In fact, it's incredible the way it comes up, and it will come up as clear as the day it was done. It's absolutely amazing when you see it. So this individual, I had a look and thought, actually, I don't think there are going to be any tattoos. And the pathologist had already said there's no evidence of any tattoos. So I was like, we'll go through our process. It's processes of 4, so we'll go through it methodically. And I had a technician helping me, and I said, well, we'll do our photographs. And actually, this was an older infrared camera I had, and it had a small screen at the back. And I actually looked at the back of the screen, and I thought, no, I can't see anything. Nothing going on, but I'll go and look at my computer and just double check. So I said, hang tight and I'll let you know what our next step is. And I went to my computer and brought up a photograph of the back, and I nearly fell off my chair. There was a massive tattoo, 30 centimetre by 15 centimetre, amazing, geographic tattoo, very identifiable. I was actually shaking. I couldn't believe it. It was actually one of those CSI moments, which is not really how life is, but it was one of those moments. And I rang our ID team, and they were very excited. This is big news for someone we're trying to identify.
Who's mummified and very difficult to assess anyway.
Yes, and I was very smug thinking that this person wasn't going to have tattoos, because, as I said, usually you can see a partial tattoo or something. And it just shows you, you've got to be careful, cognitive bias, you've got to be so careful. That's why our processes are so important. And not only was the back there, I could see a little bit of the arm and I could see another tattoo on the arm. I was like, okay. So went back and fully documented the tattoos, and there were over 10 tattoos. So this was amazing. A varying quality of tattoos. Some were professional and some were amateur tattoos, which sometimes can help give you some ideas with identification, but that's just, subjective, trying to find out leads. So we had the police artist involved and showing all the tattoos, about to release it to the public. And fortunately, this person was identified through DNA. So we got that. But also in the formal identification was one of the tattoos that had been recorded previously. So this was a good result for the team. It all worked together. That's what you want. You want all the multiple teams coming together to put all the data into a big pile in front of you, and then you can just put the puzzle together and it all fits.
So the infrared, it doesn't make any difference, the original skin colour or the current skin colour. It just penetrates down the layers of the skin. That's
right. Yes, it's incredible. So some ink colours come up better than others. So black ink absorbs the infrared. A lot of tattoos have got the black ink, so that works very well. Some other colours, the blue or red, don't come up as well. But for the most part, it is actually sort of magical the way it happens. And we do use it quite a bit, specifically for burnt cases and decomposed cases.
So it still works with burnt victims?
As long as it's not full thickness burns, but if it's a superficial flash burn, which completely obscures the tattoos on the outside, then you can see through that.
How frequently people are tattooed and how many people have tattoos now, does that make your job easier or more difficult?
I think it's probably easier. It's another piece of information that can help identify someone. And, sometimes people haven't got as much dental work. So, but it is a circumstantial data. It is one that has to be looked at in contribution with other things like the DNA or dental or scars, and obviously the visual identification is a big one.
If the tattoo's been removed, like for example with laser, does the infrared penetrate deeper than the laser?
So sometimes that is possible, which can have implications for alleged perpetrators who may have, had their identifiable tattoo identified by an alleged victim survivor. And if they try to change the tattoo afterwards, it is possible sometimes to see a tattoo underneath a changed tattoo. It just depends on who did it and how deep the ink goes, and it's a case by case. Sometimes you can see the tattoo underneath and sometimes you can't.
Are you able to talk about any other cases that you've sort of worked on? Any other identifying signs, birthmarks, anything that you've found that has helped?
All the little marks on our skin can be identifiable. I have been involved in cases and historic cases where someone will be brought in many, many years later to have some part of their body photographed to see if that matches up with the memory of a victim survivor. Unfortunately, in a way, I'm not privy to a lot of things that happen after the photograph's taken. After the photographs are taken, it kind of goes out into the system, and I have no way of following up. It's only if one of our physicians says to me, "Oh, this happened with this case that you photographed," or one of our pathologists says, "I just went to court and found that really useful, that image really helped," or something. But most of the time it's years later as well that these things end up in court.
Do you find that a benefit, not knowing what's happened, in terms of you not being emotionally engaged for that whole duration of the process?
I think it is a benefit overall. You think you want to know, but afterwards I think it's probably a lot we have a lot of cases. The sheer volume of that would probably be overwhelming. I think it's better to not know too much.
Coming up, something washes up on a beach. Is it a body or something else?
Have you ever photographed anything that was not human in the mortuary?
Well, we did have one case, and I'm going to say first up that no judgment on anyone who called in this case, because it did, to all intents and purposes, look suspicious. There was something washed up on the beach. It did look like a part of a human torso or lower part of the body, and some legs and feet, decomposed, and absolutely correct to ring that in and alert the homicide squad and alert our whole team. So it came through the whole process. I think it probably got right through to the CT scan, and a pathologist took one look at it and said, not human. But I ended up photographing this specimen, and it did look like sort of a lower limbs and perhaps feet. You could see the jointed, sort of look like knuckles or feet. But we are also used to looking at decomposed tissue and bodies and skeletons. So I think we all knew that it's not human. It turned out to be a seal, and the seal flippers. And it sounds like, oh my God, how could they mistake that? But it actually does look like, if you look up the X-ray of a seal flipper, it does not look that different to a foot.
Because it's not as if you have vets on standby in the morgue.
Sometimes we do work with vets or the museum and things like that. I mean, I did photograph tiger snake bite. We photographed the skeleton of the tiger snake, looking at the distance between the fangs and things like that to get, and the angle of the fangs, because, we're interested in what the bite looks like. Also photographing like tool marks with our anthropologists, very important if they've got a bone that someone's found as skeletal remains, if the bone's in two parts, was it broken before the person was deceased? Is it animal predation that's broken it, or is it tool mark? Was it a sawn in half? All these have got different implications. So we can photograph very carefully the ends of those bones and looking for tool marks, patterns that match certain tools or implements. And we've got a small studio in the mortuary where we can do some techniques called cross-polarization to get rid of reflections. And we can photograph those at very close magnification, try and look for tool marks or teeth marks. It's often not conclusive, like this one photograph solves the whole case. It's more like, oh, there's a whole pattern that's consistent with this, or it doesn't necessarily prove anything on its own, but as a part, it's all putting the data together. I do also remember one case that we used cross-polarization with was I actually went to Miami, and there was a body packer, deceased, who'd come from Cuba to Miami with many condom-sized capsules in their stomach, and one had ruptured on the flight, and this person had deceased on the flight of a massive overdose of, I'm thinking it was cocaine. And then we photographed these. There were 72 of these large packages in this individual's stomach. So we just use cross-polarization to have a look. Can we look through how it's packed, the layers? So you would document each as much as you can of how they're put together, because that's important for their teams.
To identify possibly where the drugs came from, or what syndicate or who was actually trafficking them.
Exactly, and what they're using at the moment to package drugs up, and what methodology they're using. So I mean, it's always moving, and So I think that was interesting, and also just to try and look through and see what was in each package. Were they different things? Were they the same?
A lot of people in medicine and forensic science and the police have what they describe as a cup that fills up. And once that cup's full, they can't keep going and doing their job anymore. Do you have a cup, and do you think it'll fill up?
I think everyone has a cup. I think that there are definitely times that it does feel overwhelming. I'm very lucky. My colleague who I work with, the other photographer, is absolutely fantastic. And I think that I can debrief straight away. He knows exactly what to say. And I've also got a very good friend, some very good friends, colleagues, and we're actually all very supportive. There's no shame in saying, I'm feeling overwhelmed and I need to step out today, or that case is a trigger for me and I'm just really upset and I'm gonna leave. You can do that and absolutely everyone's behind you. There's no problem with that. I think everyone has their way of managing, and so far, whatever protective mechanisms I put in place while I'm at work, it's often left at work, so I feel okay.
It sounds like you can compartmentalise quite effectively.
Yes, it's actually very interesting. I can often, if someone asks me what cases I photographed earlier in the day, sometimes I can't think. I actually have to really scramble to think what I did during the day. I'm so good at putting a compartmentalisation there. But having said that, sometimes someone can say, oh, there was a case number 2 days ago of this particular deceased, and I can come up with the case number, which is crazy. I mean, how would you possibly, with all the case numbers that we come across, how would that bit of information be retained? The thing that can undo you is often something innocuous. So while people who I've worked with for years can cope with all sorts of things, sometimes it's something very small that you can sort of relate to. For me, one of the worst things that can happen is if you're documenting property and if it's a mobile phone and if the mobile phone rings, you know, I'm thinking to myself, don't look at the screen, don't look at the screen. You look at the screen, it might say, you know, mum or dad or something, and that is just devastating. It just brings you right back to what a horrible, horrible situation that is. So that's harder to deal with, that kind of thing.
Are there any other triggers that you've found?
Certainly anyone who's the age of one of your loved ones, for example, that I always find that difficult. It just makes it real, born in the same year or something. You just think, oh, that's hard, because you can then relate with the other relatives that are going through something awful. We have a list of names, of admissions, and I always check, actually, to make sure I don't know anyone. And it has happened that I've known someone. So a quick check's always a good idea, because you don't always know if it's someone that you have known from school or something and then name pops up. You wouldn't know anything other than that, and I can be excused from the mortuary for that day.
Karen, this has been really fascinating, and it's a field that I think we take for granted, your involvement, and that you're not trained specifically in pathology and forensic medicine. So the fact that you do this work is incredible, and the fact that you're an essential piece in the puzzle, that's the way I see it. So thank you very much for joining us and sharing some very personal moments.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
That's all we have time for in this Rewind episode. If you know someone who loves true crime, recommend our series to them. And check out our videos by searching Listener Crime on TikTok or Instagram. I'm Dan Mullins, with sound designed by Niall Fernandez. This series was recorded and produced on Gadigal land.